All right, let's talk QBs here.
Yeah.
Tier 1, number 1, I mean, I've got Josh
Mm,
Allen. You can make the argument for Patrick Mahomes, I think, as well. Last, what, 3 seasons, 4 seasons, Josh Allen has been pretty much QB1. That DeMar Hamlin game is the only reason why he wasn't QB1, I think, last year. So, and he can throw the football as well. He's not just a rusher. He can throw the football as well. So I think the longevity for him, I like. And then I've got Patrick Mahomes at 2. And I think that's pretty much the consensus. But what do you think about 1, 2 right there? Do you have anything different? Or do you think maybe there's an argument to be made to have somebody else there?
as much as I would like to argue Mahomes over Josh Allen, there's a large enough sample size that I don't have an argument. So that's why I'm not going to argue that. So yeah, I have no problem with that. And also listen, you know, the Kansas City team, like I stated earlier, they've gone through kind of like a metamorphosis where they're not this explosive offense anymore. But that doesn't mean Patrick Mahomes is not an amazing quarterback. You don't want him as your, you know, your dynasty QB1, but Josh Allen is the superior fantasy player at this point and going down the line potentially as well.
I mean, but Mahomes for me, I mean, solidified at least at 2. I can't put him
For
down
sure.
any further
For
than that.
sure.
I mean, we've seen this guy throw, 50 touchdowns. Like,
That was with Tyreek Hill and a young Travis Kelsey. So
and then we've seen him without that finish as literally QB1, which was last year, who threw what 41 tutties, 45
I,
tutties altogether.
I
So I mean,
hear it.
yeah, it was a long time ago, 50, but he's hitting 40 tutties pretty much consistently. Obviously not this season, but there's a lot of obviously reasons for that. Not to make excuses, but for me, I think he's a great buy low, especially right now. Like if people putting him on the block, if you can get Mahomes for cheaper just because he had one
There's a
downish
value there.
season.
There's some value to be had there to go buy him. I agree.
Jamie, I feel you on the Josh Allen with the rushing, but like he can throw the ball at 2, so I don't necessarily think he has to rely on the rushing.
And also, just really quick to touch on that before you continue, I think it's a little bit different with Josh
Still
Allen
have.
because because of his build, right? He's not Lamar, he's not Kyler Murray, he's not Michael Vick. He's a bigger, stronger dude. So I don't worry as much about the rushing as I do, because even when they're down by the goal line, bro, he's a fullback down by the goal line. So that's still that value is gonna hold.
He hasn't like been injured or been getting
No,
injured,
not
so it's
terribly.
you
No.
can feel you can still feel pretty safe with Josh Allen. Now, this is where it gets tricky. This is where the conversations start happening. So
Yep.
for me, I kind of have one more guy in this tier. And for me, it's still Jalen Hurts. And I know that he's fallen down rankings. And I know that people are, maybe worried about Jalen Hurts. But Jalen Hurts, I mean, QB9, QB3, QB2 this year on a what you can say was a down year. Like things just weren't necessarily great, but still finishes as QB2. He's got the contract still, and
Yep.
he's 25 years old. So for me,
Yep.
he's still safe. He's still a top 3 guy for me. And that kind of closes off my first tier. But we can make arguments to have other guys in this tier, I think, kind of as well. But what do you think? And, do you have Jalen Hurts there, or is that kind of different for you now, barring this past
No,
season?
no, I think that's actually a good thing that we saw him have a down year and still finish as QB2. I think that's more of a positive than anything.
Hmm.
And remember, they lost both of their coordinators, right? They lost their offensive coordinator after the Super Bowl run. So that is bound to happen. Now, the one thing that does concern me is AJ Brown not playing in the playoff game. There seems to be some weird dynamic going on there. Remember, 2 months ago he was going on a historic run of 150-yard game, or 3 months
Hmm.
ago he was on a historic run of 150-yard game. So to kind of see that collapse, happening, and then obviously some issues with the coach, the head coach, Sirianni, it's a little concerning. But from an overall standpoint, because he has the contract, because he has a good nucleus around him now, his offensive line might be a little bit of an issue. I don't know if Jason Kelsey is retiring. That's a big part of how you could feel about Jalen Hurts. Now, we tend to not mention the offensive lines as much, but I think with Jalen Hurts, the offensive line does matter because obviously that tush push, and just his style of play. So I still feel comfortable with Jalen Hurts as 3, but I do have another guy in this tier. You know exactly
Before you
who.
go into that, I just want to say one more thing about the tush push, because even if they do take that away, they're just going to QB sneak it. Like, he's still a big enough dude. Like, they're just going to QB sneak it in. So I'm not
Mhm.
necessarily concerned about the tush push, because I know that somebody might bring it up in the comments. 'Cause I know we could definitely make an argument for definitely another guy in this tier, and I think that, you know, a lot of people are going to want to have him in this tier. But go ahead, who is that?
It's Joe Burrow, man.
I wasn't expecting
And
that. I wasn't expecting that, actually, but go
yeah,
ahead.
no, it's Joe Burrow, and there's just even even last year, right before the injury, and I will say this: Joe Burrow's my guy. He let a lot of people down this year, but right before he got hurt, you started to see
Mhm.
who the fuck he really is. And he's a guy that can put you on his shoulders and take you places. And that, for me, setting the injury aside for this particular conversation, seeing what Joe Burrow can do, he can carry your team. He can be a Patrick Mahomes, a Josh Allen. He's a needle mover. And for me, that solidifies him in this one spot. He is at the back end of it just because of the health concerns over the last couple of years. And then obviously T. Higgins free agency looms pretty large, right? What are they going to do at the running back position? But I just think Joe Burrow's so amazing, and he's been able to really show that he can carry a team and move a needle.
Yeah, I mean, 2021, 4,600 yards, 36 overall tutties, finishes as QB7. 2022 finishes as QB4, 4,500 yards on 41 total tutties. So, you know, he's up there in the high 30s of touchdowns, in the 40 range. So, you know, for me, that's why I kind of have to have him up there. Like, yeah, he had the injury concerns, but, you know, for us that play in these super flex leagues, like, these are advantages that we have now, because now, number one, they're becoming available where they never were available like that before, all just because of one injury that happened in one season. And, you know, now you kinda have the flexibility almost in the top end of the draft where, like, Burrow is falling, Jalen Hurts is falling right now. Right now, CJ Stroud, Lamar Jackson, these guys are getting drafted before these guys.
Hmm.
So if you have, like,
Justin
the
Herbert, you could throw in there.
103, 104 in your startups, right? Do you have an opportunity now to say, "Hey, maybe I can move back?" You know, who really wants CJ Stroud right over here? I'll take Joe Burrow a couple picks later, you know, and be able to get assets on top of that. But as of right now, CJ Stroud is a guy that people have up here in this top tier. I mean, for me, I had Burrow starting off the second tier, but I'm okay with him up there. But if he's going to be up there, then I think you got to put Stroud up there. I would have Burrow and Stroud here basically on the second level here. But if we're going to leave him up there, then I got to put Stroud, because I think Stroud is kind of right there almost on that level. I can't put him over Joe Burrow yet. People have done that already. But what do you have? 4,100 yards, I believe, about 23 tutties for CJ Stroud. Wind up missing what, 2 or 3 games. So could have been in that 30 tutty range. But, you know, wait till he gets up there into that 40 range like Joe Burrow can. But CJ Stroud is extremely young. So I'm okay if you want to have CJ Stroud over Joe Burrow. They're more like 4A, 4B for me. Either or, you can go with either one. But Burrow's been the guy that's proven so far, and he's got an elite wide receiver in Jamar Chase. So, you know, you can always kind of feel comfortable, I think, with Joe Burrow. And like you said, once we saw the middle of the season, once he got healthy, he had a string of games where he was just slinging it. So yeah,
Yeah.
if we're gonna put Burrow up there, let's just throw Stroud up there too. Fuck it.
The thing with Stroud is obviously you want to see it outside of one season, but that sophomore slump can be a little bit of a real thing in terms of now there's a full season of tape on you. Is he going to make the adjustment? Like, those are all just general questions for any, first year quarterback that played particularly well. The thing that excites me the most about CJ Stroud is his ability to take care of the football, right?
Mhm.
He went for a ridiculous stretch. I think he has the most passes to begin his career without an interception, and he only finished with 5 interceptions on 500 attempts in his first season. He did only play 15 games, so he did miss 2, but that for me, that's something that I take into account in terms of this young of a guy being able to protect the football at that high of a rate. You think he's only going to get much better with his decision making and kind of taking care of the football. So the interception rate is something that I paid attention as far as CJ Stroud. The numbers, the yardage, the touchdown, that's all fine and dandy. I just love that he was able to protect the ball at an elite level.
Guys, let us know what you think about like this first tier here. Where is the cutoff for you? What do you have as far as are you shuffling these guys? Do you have Stroud up higher? Do you have Burrow up higher?
I think Burrow and Stroud, if you're gonna put Stroud in there, that is, I'm comfortable with that tier 2 thing the way you had it, because I think the other
Okay.
3 guys have separated themselves in terms of consistency, rushing upside,
Mhm.
and Patrick Mahomes is Patrick Mahomes. So the way you had it made more sense.
Mhm.
I still think Joe Burrow is elite of the elite, but I understand
I do
why you
too.
kind of tiered it the way you did.
Yes, I have them basically like just leading off the second tier, but that's fine if people want to have them in that first tier too, because I think those are like the almost at least for me, they're like solidified as the top 5 guys.
Mhm.
And you can argue Lamar Jackson in there, 4-point passing touchdown or 6-point passing touchdown, right? That makes a difference as well. 1 QB leagues or super flex leagues, obviously that makes a difference as well. We're talking from a super flex perspective here because I think in 1 QB you kind of put Lamar up higher, you put A Rich up higher, right? Because those are guys where you're aiming for that upside and you can still have a second QB that's pretty good in 1 QB league. So
Mhm.
little bit different, going there. So Lamar Jackson. So Lamar Jackson would be the next guy up for me. Lamar's been awesome, and when he's healthy, he's got to stay healthy. He seemed to stay healthy this year, and I think I talked about it earlier in the season where he kind of just feels like he's trying to be a lot safer, trying to not get hurt. The way he's running the football and getting down or out of bounds, he's not even running full speed most of the time. It just looks like he's trying to be very much aware of
Mhm.
his
Mhm.
surroundings and trying to not get hurt. And he's, done better passing the football. Hopefully, Andrews is back to his normal self coming next season, because Mark Andrews has been, I mean, we've seen some killer seasons from Mark Andrews. So would you have Lamar there as well, or would there be someone else you throw in here?
Yeah, it's pretty hard to argue with Lamar. I think the season that he had, right? The numbers don't necessarily blow you away, right? 3,600 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. The rushing wasn't by his standards, right? By Lamar's standards, the rushing wasn't overwhelming either, right? 820 yards, 5 touchdowns. His yards per carry, though, interestingly enough, are 5.5, which is down. He's usually in that high 6s, close to 7 range. And I think that's kind of what you're alluding to is he'd rather play all 17 games and average 5.5 than play 12 games and average 7 yards a carry. Right.
Mhm,
So that kind of alludes to exactly what you're speaking about. So you want Lamar there for the full 17. Obviously, he didn't play the last week because they had everything locked up. So he only played 16 games this year, but he would have played 17 if they had something to play for. Lamar got the bag, right? That's what a year ago we were talking about Lamar getting the bag.
mhm,
So Lamar got the bag. They drafted Zay Flowers, right? Isaiah Likely is a legitimate threat out there. The running game is going to be an issue, but they're going to bring somebody in. They're going to have running backs to play around with there. So and his floor is so ridiculously high because of the
mhm.
run and everything that he
Yep,
can't be any lower than what he is right here.
yep. So to round off my tier 2, I would have Anthony
Ooh.
Richardson and then Justin Herbert as my
Ooh.
next guys. And you could flip
Now it's
flop
getting
those if
spicy.
you could flip flop those if you want, but that would round off my tier 2 of players. And I have rookies on here as well, but I'm gonna add the rookies in after we finish tiering everything. I'm gonna slot them in after.
I like
So
it.
if anybody is looking for rookies, I'm gonna slot those guys in at the end. But yeah, I'll have A Rich and I'll have Herbert. A Rich, we've saw in his healthy games, he's been a top 3 QB that he's played fully healthy. Now you can make the argument that could be cause for concern, but hopefully he can get his act together, start doing like Lamar a little bit more, and you're trying to protect himself. As Trevor Lawrence actually told A Rich, like, this is the NFL. This is different. Like, you need to protect yourself. And he didn't protect himself. He wound up getting hurt. But he's a franchise guy there, and we've seen his upside and what he can be, especially as young as he is. So for me, I've got to slot him in right after Lamar, and then after that, I've got to have Herbert still up there in that second tier. He'll be the QB at the end of this tier for me. We've seen what Herbert can do. We know what he can do. Now it's just a matter of, all right, fixing the damn offense, getting them some weapons that don't get hurt, because that's been an issue now as well. Hopefully they address that in the draft. But what do you think here about the end of this tier after Lamar? And what would you have different, if anything?
I can't put Anthony Richardson in that tier 2 just yet. I'm gonna have to see him play a full healthy season before I can just kind of anoint him up there, because all of those guys, obviously CJ Stroud is the exception, but CJ Stroud had a hell of a rookie year and stayed healthy for the most part. So Anthony Richardson just doesn't belong in there for me because I haven't seen it enough, right? We saw a very small sample size, and by Halloween, we didn't hear anything from Anthony Richardson. I don't remember exactly when he got hurt. I think it was before that. So I can't have Anthony Richardson in there just yet. But Justin Herbert is right after Lamar. And the biggest reason for that is, first of all, we've seen what Justin Herbert could do, but also Justin Herbert has a coach now.
That's true. That's true.
And if you look at John Harbaugh's record with quarterbacks, his track record with quarterbacks, Andrew Luck, how'd that work out? Pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. He went to San Francisco and turned Alex Smith, I believe, into a pretty solid, stable quarterback. He drugged Jimmy G to the goddamn Super Bowl, if I'm getting it correct. John Harbaugh's legit. Justin Herbert belongs right after Lamar Jackson at 7. And I think a lot of people have kind of soured on Justin Herbert just because of, the lack of playoff success, the lack of success kind of, with teams that we expected to play well. That would be my issue with this particular tier 2.
I dig that. I can absolutely live with that. I think Herbert is the guy that you probably feel safer with. A Rich, obviously that's the pure upside that you're trying to roll with. And in Superflex leagues, as your QB1, that could be risky if it doesn't pan
Very
out.
risky.
But
Very
for
risky.
me, I just feel like, we've seen that. Like you said, it is a small sample size, but he is the franchise guy. He's going to be there. He's going to get his opportunities. So if he can just stay healthy, which is an if, but we said the same thing about CMC, right? We
Yep.
said the same thing about Lamar, right? And I'm fine with having him lower if you don't want to go for, that upside. For sure, Herbert is cemented in there for me. I think, like you said, a lot of people have soured on Herbert, and you see it more now from like a lot of more like redraft players now starting to get into Dynasty. Real Dynasty players know, like, all right, this is like, we should be buying Herbert. We should be buying Mahomes, right? Or when you're even just trying to just play in the market, right? It's not necessarily always about the players, right? But it's the market. Like I mentioned before, like if you have the 103 or the 104, I don't care if I have CJ Stroud or Joe Burrow or Lamar maybe or Herbert, right? Can I get to the back end of that tier, pick up extra assets and extra pick on top of that just to move down a little bit in the tier? Like, I'm okay with that. Same thing just trading wise. CJ
Yeah.
Stroud is valued so high right now. Can I get Joe Burrow in a second? Like, I'm fine with that.
Oh, I would do that in a
You know,
heartbeat
you know what
and
I,
run for the
you know what
hills.
I mean? But that's the point, like where we're at, where people have, these kind of values where it's not a big deal from player to player. Like,
Mhm.
just play the market, get the asset because of what you can do with that. But yeah, that's the end of tier 2 for me. And then in the tier 3 here, we've got Kyler. We've
Mm-mm.
got your boy Jordan Love. We've got Tua.
Ooh, there's somebody getting disrespected.
We've
That man
got
is getting disrespected.
Dak. We've got Purdy. We
Okay.
got T-Law. This is a big tier. This is one of the biggest tiers for me. We've got Fields and we've got
Ooh,
Jared Goff. So
okay.
a large tier for me. But this
Which makes
is
sense.
basically the order that I would have it from top tier to bottom. And again, it's a tier. So if you want to move guys around in that tier, depending on your liking, that's absolutely fine. But this is what I'm kind of rolling with here. Kyler Murray, we know how good he is when he's healthy. We saw him come back last year. Hopefully he gets another weapon this year. Maybe it's Marvin Harrison. Maybe it's not. Jordan Love coming after that, the young quarterback that's coming in hot, good second half of the season. And Tua, you could flip-flop that if you want. You could put Tua in front of Love, if anything, but a lot of people love right now. But Tua
Damn
led the
right.
league in passing yards there, and they're going to sign him to a contract. The team has said that they do like him. They want to give him a long-term contract, even though he was asked at the end of the year. He wasn't that good in the playoffs. But
Mhm.
who can they get that's better, I think, is the main question, especially for them with the system that they're running. Like, I think Tua is going to be absolutely fine there. Then I've got Dak coming in right after Tua. A little bit older, but had one of his best seasons. is looking good, has CeeDee Lamb, who's a beast right now. So Dak is going to be the next guy. Then you got Purdy rolling in. T-Law, I have pretty much towards the end of this tier. And I know maybe a lot of people have questions about T-Law. He just hasn't done anything. How can I put him ahead of some of these other guys? You can do it because of age if you want, but at the quarterback position, more than any of the other positions, they play so much longer that like it's not a crazy big difference a few years at the QB position, at least in my eyes. For quarterbacks, they last a little bit longer. They play to a little bit older. Purdy's throwing 30 tutties. Dak is throwing 30 tutties. T-Law, I don't know what he's doing. But he hasn't played up to our expectations. Now, do they maybe go out and get a top tier one? Like, does T. Higgins wind up on a team like
I
the
was going to mention
Jaguars,
that
right?
name.
Does that help him vault into the 30 touchdown range, you know, that some of these other guys have? So that's the question marks, you know, around T-Law. I just haven't seen as much to put him any higher than some of the other guys that have him in front. And you've got Justin Fields. Justin Fields, is he even going to be a starter next year? Is he going to be on the Bears? Is he going to be on the Falcons? Is he going to be somewhere else? He's got 1 year to really prove himself here, because if he gets hurt, and then I've got Jared Goff there as well. But Justin Fields, I put him ahead of Jared Goff for the simple fact of that upside. You know, if he does play and winds up getting on a team, the upside that he has to finish as a top 10, top 5 quarterback, I like that upside. And then Jared Goff, who kind of always gets hated on, always gets pushed down to the bottom, but it's just
One
a
of my
solid
biggest
quarterback.
values
He's
ever.
going to give you 28 to 32-ish touchdowns. That's just what he's going to do. He's going to give you 45-ish 100 yards, 28 to 32 touchdowns. He might not finish top 10, but maybe, you know, top 12, top 13. Like, he's going to be a top 15-ish guy. He's going to be solid for you, and he's a fine QB2 to have.
He's probably the best QB2 that you can ask for, in my estimation. And he's that's exactly where I was going with that, is the value for him, because, and then we, like you said, we haven't even factored in the rookies yet. So that makes Jared Goff even that much more of a value. So Jared Goff to me, and I've been singing Jared Goff's praises. I'm a Packers fan. I have no love for the Lions, right? But I don't really hate the Lions because they haven't been a threat. But from the standpoint of being an objective football fan, is I've loved me some Jared Goff for the last 2 seasons, right? Even before last, you know, at the end of last season, you know, going into this season, you just look at what they have and what they put together. And listen, that Lions team is going to be solid. Like, they're solid at every position, skill wise, right? You got good receivers. You got probably the best upcoming tight end in football, right? And they go out and get Gibbs. Like, yeah, Goff makes it. He kind of keeps that. He's the glue for that team that keeps it all together. So I love me some Jared Goff there.
Yeah,
I do have an issue.
All right, go ahead. We'll get to that in a second. So that is basically my tier 3. It's a large tier 3 because I feel like after pretty much Herbert and Anthony Richardson go in like the back end of the first round, you're going to have Kyler and all these guys kind of go in the second and third rounds pretty much. You know, so there's a tier break where after Herbert, you're probably going to see more wide receivers. You're going to see all the Chases, CDs, Amon-Ra's. You know, you'll see the 101 like Marvin Harrison pretty much. And then you'll start seeing some of these other quarterbacks. But yeah, what do you think about the tier 3? What do you have an issue with? What are you switching up? What are you taking out of this tier? What are you adding in this tier? What are you feeling?
Kyler and Dak are switching positions for me.
Kyler and Dak. That's okay. I'm okay with that too. You can put Dak up here and put Kyler. Well, I can't put Kyler lower than Love and Tua just because of the rushing upside. But I am okay with putting Dak ahead of Love or Tua if you want to. But go ahead.
The thing with Kyler is I know from a fantasy perspective he can be phenomenal and really good. That team, for the most part, isn't that great. I know, listen, you add Marvin Harrison, you feel really good about it. They're going to be down in a bunch of games. You feel like he'll have to throw it, run it, you know, do what he does. He's a smaller dude that runs around a lot, and that makes me nervous for his long-term fantasy stability. Kyler makes me really nervous. So from that standpoint, I'd take Dak over Kyler. honestly. I know, listen, Kyler has a higher upside in a sense, but I think Dak has more long-term stability than a Kyler Murray, even at what Dak is 29, 30 now. So I do like me some Dak. And then I would go Jordan Love right after Dak, honestly, because I just think that Jordan Love, especially down the stretch, and I know it was only his first year, but him and CJ Stroud kind of have mirror, seasons in terms of obviously Jordan Love's not a rookie, but they're both their first year starting. They wildly exceeded expectations, and a lot was placed on Jordan Love. Bro, no Christian Watson for a bulk of the season. His best tight end, Luke Musgrave, got hurt. Aaron Jones was in and out of the lineup all season, and the dude still finished with 32 touchdowns passing. He had another, I think, 4 or 5 rushing touchdowns. So I think that's an underrated part of Jordan Love's game is his ability to be able to move around. Like, he's athletic. He's not some statue back there where he could move around, and he has some rushing upside. So I have Jordan Love second slot there, and then Tua behind him, and then Kyler there. The rest of that list
Sure.
I'm okay with as well. So that's how I would have it. I would have Dak 1, Jordan Love 2, Tua 3. You could argue Kyler over Tua just because Kyler has the rushing upside.
Mhm.
And then Tua there because he has all those weapons.
Yeah, I think any of these 4 between Dak, Kyler, Love, and Tua, you can mix it up however you want, but I feel like that's a kind of you could throw Brock in there as well, kind of, people like Brock too, but you could throw those kind of 5 guys pretty much. Where
Yeah,
do you have T-Law?
you know what's frustrating about it is that he's Herbert to a lesser degree, right? Like we can kind of explain away why Justin Herbert wasn't able to play well. I think the problem is with Trevor Lawrence. How can we explain why he didn't play well?
I mean, well,
How
we've
do we
also seen
explain it?
Justin Herbert, have 40 touchdowns and 37 like, we've seen him have 40 almost 40 touchdowns 2 years in
Right.
a row.
So how do we explain why why Trevor Lawrence hasn't played as well? Because we think the physical talent's there. They added Calvin Ridley. They have a Christian Kirk. They have, ETN, who's a really good running back, Evan Ingram, who's a really good tight end, right? So all the components were there. And that that meltdown the Jaguars had at the end of the season, I think that's left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouth as well.
What happens to Fields? Like, he's gotta be somewhere in here. Like, for me, like, this is kinda where I have to slot him. Like, I can't really put him much higher, and I can't really put him much lower because there's just still so many questions.
I think the biggest thing for me with Justin Fields is if not now, when, right? He's
Mhm.
teetering on that oblivion like situation. And I think that him going to the Chicago Bears didn't do him any justice because historically they do not have a good organization in terms of drafting and developing quarterbacks. So I think him going to the Chicago Bears didn't do him any justice. And that's not me hating on the Bears as a Packers fan. That's me just spitting out facts, right? So
Mhm.
I think Justin Fields, it's now or never this year for him. And I think we get lulled into a little bit of false sense in terms of his long-term prospects because they always have these terrible starts to the season, right? They're virtually out of it. And then the last 6 games, it's like they're killing people. Where Justin Fields is putting up awesome numbers, the Bears rip off a couple of wins in a row, and it's like, oh, is Justin Fields the future now?
If we know, like, the Bears are committing to him, like, maybe then, like, he moves up in here, but for now, I can't have him any higher, but if you do and you're going for just, that upside, like, I'm not mad at it. Before we get into the next tier, guys, smash that like for us if you haven't already. Smash that subscribe if you're new. Well, just to be clear, we are talking dynasty. So these are dynasty rankings. Just rankings in general. I mean, there's just it's not just so black and white, right? I mean, the tiers like you might always in different situations you might want, if you're in a win now situation or if you're in rebuild situation, you're going to want different players, right? But this is just a general breakdown of rankings basically almost in startup drafts, just rankings in general of how I feel for the future, what their contracts are right now, all the risk that's involved, all of the value that's involved. There's a ton of different factors that you kind of have to bake into
A lot of
how you
layers.
make your
Yeah.
rankings. And everybody is a little bit different in how they do their rankings. Just like Hammer doesn't agree with some of the guys I have up there. I don't agree with some of the guys he has. Everybody's going to be a little bit a little bit different, but in a generalization, this is why I try and break it up into tiers.
Of
Kyler and
that.
Dak could be in tier 2. You could make the argument for that, but when you're doing, like, especially if when you're doing a startup draft, like, after Herbert, like, all these wide receivers pretty much go. Kyler
Quarterback.
goes somewhere in, like, the early second, mid-second, and then Jordan Love, mid-second, late second. So it's kinda just that's kinda how I break it down, but that's fair if you wanna put those guys in tier 2 as well.
Yeah, I could see the argument for Dak in tier 2, and that's why I would have had him number 1 in tier 3, just because Dak's gonna play another. He's
Sure.
30, but Dak could play to 38, 40.
Coming to this next tier, and this is kinda why my tier 3 ends here, because now we start getting into the
Questions with
more
the
question
questions.
marks, more older players that they call it the QB purgatory, right? What's
Mhm.
really kinda happening with these players? So, leading off this tier for me, it's gotta be Deshaun Watson. I know he
Yeah,
was
boy.
disappointing, but he's
Yeah,
got the
boy.
contract. He's gonna be on that team. He's gonna play. I need to see him be better. But, the weird thing, well, I don't wanna say weird, but when he got hurt and then, like, once Flacco came through, they changed the offense, right? They started passing the ball, like, a lot more. And I don't necessarily think I loved the offense that they were trying to run with Watson beforehand. So maybe if they change it up a little bit and do pass it a little bit more and let Deshaun Watson kind of do what he really does best. I didn't feel like he was really playing like himself. Like, it was just a different kind of offense that he was running. So I'm interested to see kind of what you think about Deshaun Watson and that whole situation.
So this time a year ago, if you for all our loyal subscribers out there, this time a year ago, Steve was a huge Deshaun Watson buy because of the value, and I understand that, and I'm going to take
Do it
that
again
into
this year.
account.
He's even better value now.
I'm gonna I'm gonna take that. I'm gonna factor that into my response here. No, thank you on Deshaun Watson. No, thank you.
It's
Now,
fair.
there's value there. I don't disagree with that. I totally agree with that.
Let me put in the rest of my tier here. I've got Bryce Young, I've got
Mm.
Baker Mayfield, I've got
Ooh,
Kirk, I've got
that's
Aaron
spicy.
Rodgers is another kinda big tier because now we've got all these old guys
Hmm.
that you can throw in here.
I like Russ in there.
What I miss?
I,
I got
I,
Russell here too.
I'll
And
be
then
honest
there's
with
one
you.
more,
Oh,
it's
go ahead.
Will Levis, and you can kinda put Will Levis anywhere kinda in here. He is still a little bit of a risk, but it's possible that he's safe for this year. Maybe they grab a quarterback. I mean, but I think that Levis kinda gave them some sort of life a little bit, like something
He'll
to
get
be
an
a little bit
opportunity.
excited
Yeah,
about, where
yeah.
he might get this opportunity this year to kind of show what he has. So you can kind of throw him in anywhere here in with the old guys. I'm fine with that, depending on, like, how you were trying to build
Hmm.
your team, I guess. But that's what I've got for this tier. Yeah, what do you think about this particular tier? I've got Bryce here. I still am a believer in Bryce. I think it's just a bad situation. They've got to get him some weapons. That offense needs to change. Like, just everything was just wrong. But I still am a believer, and he's still a good young quarterback that's going to have his opportunities. Baker Mayfield, a guy that has kind of been floating around everywhere, hasn't really found his home. He might have found a home now. Did they give him a contract this year? If they don't, somebody else probably sure will. He brought them to the playoffs. I mean, they've got some weapons over there. So
Won a playoff game.
I feel like Baker could get a little contract there. Kirk Cousins, we know he's probably got a couple years left. Is it in Minnesota? Is it not? I don't know, but he's a gunslinger, so I feel comfortable with Kirk Cousins maybe for a season or two. Aaron Rodgers, another one. We don't know how long, maybe another season or two, maybe more, who knows? But I feel like he's at least a top 15-ish quarterback. You've got Garrett Wilson over there. Do they bring in somebody else? You've got Brees Hall. So he should be pretty safe there. Matt Stafford, another maybe 1 to 2 years. He's always banged up. We don't know what's going to happen. Does that team implode? Do they just not? Are they not good next year? Does somebody get hurt? And then do they have to just kind of revamp everything? Does he wind up retiring? Who knows? Russell Wilson, same kind of situation. He's a free agent right now. We don't know where he's going. So kind of you have some question marks here in this kind of tier. Everybody's got questions. And then, like I said, finish it off with Will Levis there. And you can move Will Levis up to, behind Baker Mayfield if you want, as far as age concerns. I feel like the Kirk, Aaron Rodgers, Stafford, Russ, those are guys that you can probably hopefully depend on as your QB2 or QB3, but I probably want somebody else because it's not that comfortable. If you went into last year with Aaron Rodgers as your QB2, you were
You're
screwed.
smoked.
He's more
Yep.
kind of have to be that QB3. It's hard to just kind of rely on some of these older guys with injury. Same thing with Kirk Cousins, right? With injuries that happen and how old they are. Russ winds up getting benched. I mean,
And he
so
played
all
pretty
these guys,
well.
he did, and he did play well, and that was, the unfortunate thing about it. But that's the thing with these older quarterbacks. Like if seasons hit the fan, it's like you start benching people. But yeah, what do you think about the rest of this particular tier? Who would you have where, or who are you arguing with here?
It's no, I'm not gonna argue too much here. I already said no thank you to Deshaun Watson, but some of these other guys are very interesting. Like Bryce Young is the youngest guy in this category, and I think that he's very interesting. Another guy that I think is very interesting is you mentioned Russell Wilson, man. Like if Russell Wilson finds himself in Atlanta, how do you feel about that? You feel pretty
Mhm.
fucking good about that. So and the fact that Russell Wilson was able to bounce back and play really well. Like Denver was threatening to make the playoffs. Did we forget about that all of a sudden? Right? With a coach that didn't like him. Like, so I feel good about Russell Wilson. Matthew Stafford. The thing with Matthew Stafford is like, I think he is more risky than a Russell Wilson. So I would have Russell Wilson a little bit higher in this list, probably right after Bryce. Just because I feel like Russell Wilson could provide some stability for the next 2 or 3 years. If you're talking about a QB2, QB3 type guy. Will Levis, super interesting, but you still, a lot of unknowns there. Kirk Cousins, right? Super interesting. So yeah, I mean, listen, you could kind of flip flop any of these quarterbacks anywhere you want. And I think Marty put it best in the chat where he said this is the best ball tier,
Basketball
which I
too.
like that. That's a really good way to frame it, Marty. So yeah, I do think, like I said, two guys really stand out in this tier for me. Number one, Bryce Young, just because he's super young and we really want to see what Carolina is going to do. And then Russell Wilson, because I think he could still play. And I still think he has some, high end QB2 ball left in him, especially if he
Mhm.
goes to a place like Atlanta where the weapons are in place.
I think pretty much like after Jared Goff and like that
Yeah.
third tier, it's just like pick whoever you want or whoever you like more at that point. Do you want to go with the older guys in the production, or do you want to take the chance on having a Bryce Young wind up hitting, this year or down the line, or Deshaun Watson getting back to form? I mean, there's all question marks in that tier, so kind of divvy it up how you want to, but that's that tier there. And then I guess in the next tier, you've got like the Daniel
Ugh,
Jones, you've got, I guess, the Cars and Genos, and,
I
I
guess.
guess you can throw Pickett and Howell up there. I guess that's all the QBs I kinda, put up here at the moment, but, this is we don't know what's happening. Pickett basically lost his job already, Sam Howell, same thing. Geno was horrible this year. Carr is always shit, and Daniel Jones, he's gonna get one more season. Maybe you
Hmm.
can make the argument for him to go to be put up at the end of this tier, but
Nah, I'm good.
like, does a QB fall? Do the Giants maybe take a QB if maybe a QB falls? Like, that's a possibility too. So,
Hmm. Yeah, that's a pretty solid
you
list.
know,
Obviously, like you said, everybody has their different, rankings. And the one thing that we want to point out is we're not looking at it of QB rankings for 2023 because of the past season, right? We take the past season into account, and project
mhm.
ahead a little bit, but it's, body of work. What do we see? What's around them? What does the coaching staff look like? What does the organization look like? Is the organization in upheaval? Right. So those are all things that we factor into this and not just this past season.
All right, let's get to some of the rookies here. Caleb for me slots in at the end of tier 2 for me, right after Justin Herbert. What do you think about Caleb? Where are you having him slotted? And same thing for you guys out there watching. Where are you having Caleb slotted? For me, I've got him slotted right after Justin Herbert here.
It's tough because he's probably going to go to a team, those top three teams. What does their situation look like? Right. If he goes to New England, you feel great about that? No, I don't. So the tricky thing with the rookies is I think these guys belong somewhere in the tier 3-ish just because we don't know what their situation's going to be. And I think that does matter a ton. See Bryce Young, right? We had Bryce Young a lot higher and we felt a lot better about him doing this last year, right? And now look where we have him because he went to a shitty situation that doesn't have any weapons. And we feel a lot differently about Bryce Young right now than we did 365 days ago. So that's kind of where I'm going to have a little more restraint where I put these rookies ahead of guys that have proven something in the NFL, whether it be good, bad, or indifferent. So I would have Drake May kind of, I mean, Caleb Williams, I would have him somewhere after Brock Purdy, somewhere in that mid-tier 3 range, just because the situation is going to matter. You know, he could be a great quarterback, but the situation is going to dictate how I truly feel about him.
At least in startups, he's gonna be going right after that Herbertish. But, you know, what Caleb can do, the upside that he has, the age advantage that he has compared to some of these guys in the tier 3 is kinda why I have to slot him there at the end of tier 2, and just the value in general, all the hype and everything. Now, these other guys, I've got Jaden Daniels kinda sliding right in here at the top of tier 3, and you could argue, Drake May as well, or you could put again, that could change depending on, like, when these guys get drafted or what happens. If Jaden Daniels and Drake May both get drafted in the top 5, this is probably where, you know, you can slot him here. And you can argue to put May behind some of these guys as well, but with Jaden Daniels, that upside, I gotta have him there. Like I said, you can argue with May kinda anywhere in this 3rd tier as well, but I'm okay with all 3 of them, you putting them in the 3rd tier. I mean, that's fair as well. You know, you want to go with the proven talent over the young rookies, but we see, especially now, the way like the market is, one big game from any of these guys, and with the age, we see that value just skyrocket up. Depending how you want to play it and how you want to build your team, you know, would determine obviously who you kind of want to go with or where you want to slot them in. But as far as my rankings, this is kind of where I would have them slotted in.
Yeah, and like I said, I just have some trepidation on these rookies because the top 3 teams, like the Bears, are the best situation in terms of talent that's around those top 3 teams. Now, if somebody trades up, you know, we can't really forecast what the Bears are going to do because we're not totally sure. But let's just assume that Caleb Williams goes to the Bears. I have him in the tier 3. Like I still have him in the tier 3, you know, situation, probably behind Kyler and Jordan Love, man. Like Jordan Love's only
Yeah, you could
25
do
years
that.
old. He's about to get a contract. Like Jordan Love is going to be locked in. So that talk about Jordan Love and we're not sure what's going to happen. Like he proved it. Jordan Love's in. So for me, those guys, all 3 of those guys, Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels, are behind, at least behind Jordan Love in my eyes, just because their situations, man. Like New England is not going to be good offensively, right? I don't care who you put back there. Um, the Commanders, right? The Commanders, there's a lot of upheaval with the Commanders right now. Now, I think whoever goes to the Commanders could have some offensive potential and kind of be really solid because they do still have some talent there offensively. But and then Caleb to the Bears. I think Caleb to the Bears is the best situation for a rookie coming in just because of the ancillary parts around them and, you know, how they've kind of built that team. You got DJ Moore, you got Cole Kmet. And don't forget, the Bears have the 109 as well. So they could go out there and get an Dunazay and really set things up. So Caleb to the Bears, I can understand putting him at the back end or the front end of tier 3. If a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels fall, that's actually a benefit in my eyes because they're probably going to teams that have some stability in place, right? So that would actually make me feel better if a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels fell. Like if Jaden Daniels fell to Atlanta at 8, and I keep bringing up Atlanta because they need a quarterback. It feels like it feels like they need that quarterback. So if Jaden Daniels fell to Atlanta, you like if Drake May fell to Atlanta, you really love that situation.